Welcome back. In this set of slides, I'm going to be introducing the field of AI ethics. If you look up AI ethics through a Google search, for instance, you will find some diagrams like this. Um, these are often presented as part of recommendations made by institutional in institutions that have taken on themselves to provide oversight or feedback or some guidance about how these technologies are developed and deployed, guidance about policies regarding such things. I'm thinking of organizations like the US government or the UN or professional organizations, AAAS, groups like that. And a lot of the same terms will show up again and again, like, responsibility, explainability, transparency, fairness. There will be some overlap between these these terms in different lists or kind of overviews of AI ethics. Now, when I first started getting into this field, I found this a bit frustrating because sometimes the same terms will be used with very different meanings across contexts. Transparency, for instance, is used in a variety of different ways. Responsibility is used in a variety of different ways. And somehow the field has just developed in this way where people it's maybe too much to say they throw these terms around, but these terms get used a lot, and perhaps not enough do they get really analyzed and really broken down in terms of what kinds of things responsibility can be a name for. So what I'd like to do in kind of giving an overview of AI ethics is first give you kind of my tally of what I take to be the main considerations. And I'm aiming for something close to comprehensiveness in the set of considerations, but of course that's not possible to achieve. And along the way, I'll sort of be offering reasonable definitions of a lot of these terms that get thrown around in this way. And then I'd like to tunnel down to a few more specific concerns, in particular fairness and transparency, partly because these are ethical issues that arise in kind of unique ways in relation to AI. And so whereas there might be interesting things to, investigate about privacy or accountability, those same concerns apply in basically the same way outside of the AI space. And so, in the interest of sort of maximizing the educational value of these videos, I'll focus a little bit on some ethical problems that are not exactly unique to AI, but especially they sort of have they have special contours when it comes to their role within AI. So first, the overview. I take it that these are the main things to be concerned about. And of course, it's not possible to be entirely comprehensive, but I'm aiming at something close to comprehensiveness here. So we want AI systems to not create disproportionate or unequal risks or costs for some identifiable groups in comparison with others. We want the AI systems, in terms of their recommendations, for instance, or in terms of their classifications, we want them to be as accurate for, say, white individuals as they are for non-white individuals when it comes to, say, classifying such individuals as at risk of committing a crime or of being a terrorist or of needing needing an intervention or being such that an intervention could be helpful for educational objectives. We want the AI systems to not disproportionately negatively affect some groups in comparison with others. And that's what I mean by fair and unbiased. And of course, I'm going to say a lot more about that in the videos on fairness. We also want these systems to be understandable. And there are a whole lot of different reasons why we want that. So by that, I mean that's what I'm calling to mind by these words transparency or transparent and explainable. Um, and again, there will be a whole video on those concepts, but more or less the way these terms are used in this field, transparent, explainable, and understandable are used interchangeably. And that's a bit unfortunate because really there probably are different concepts that we ought to associate with each of those words in natural language. But the basic idea is that we want to be able to look inside these systems and understand what's going on. And one of the reasons for that is because we want to be able to identify when there's some kind of problem with how they're working. Another is because we want to be able to fix those problems. Even if we, can tell there's a problem from the outside, we might not be able to fix it if we can't understand what's going on the inside. So those are some of the reasons why we care about transparent systems. Another reason is if you think that people have a right to have some say in how these systems work, if the systems are making a difference to their lives, then they need to be able to understand the systems to be able to have a say about them. It's the value of the stakeholder feedback is almost nothing if the stakeholders aren't able to, know how the system is working, like be able to see inside it and be able to understand it. So some reasons to care about transparency, explainability, and understandability. We also want these systems and our use of these systems to not violate rights. Now, what exactly counts as a right is a contestable issue, but a lot of rights are, so there are sort of two basic categories of rights, and they may overlap sometimes. There are what are called natural rights, and there are legal rights. And so legal rights are codifications within a legal code, within the set of legal conventions, you could say, or a legal system of what entitlements individuals have. And so, for instance, bodily autonomy in a great many contexts is a legal right within American society or the American legal system. So that if somebody, say, puts their hand on my arm and I say, please take your hand off my arm, or please don't touch me, that other person is under an obligation to respect that request of mine. And if they don't, then they violated a right of mine and they can actually be charged with a crime. So, and there are a variety of other rights like this, property rights and privacy rights are pretty thin in the United States, but there are some. And so we want our AIs to respect legal rights. We also, if there are such things as natural rights, which is debatable, but these are rights that people have just by virtue of being people, you could say, or being people in certain situations. Some rights may apply to them. So something like the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights was aiming to articulate, at least in some interpretations, some of these natural rights. Others interpret that more as like a legal document. So exactly where rights fall between legal and natural is debatable, but many people recognize rights of at least, almost everybody recognizes rights of at least the legal kind, and some people recognize natural rights as well. Then we also want these systems to be responsible and trustworthy. That is, we want to be able to that's a variety of things, actually. One thing about responsibility is it's important that there be someone or some institution that is responsible when something goes wrong. That's one kind of responsibility. And when that is not the case, then various other, bad things can happen, like these systems can cause harm and there can be no possibility of redress. We also, for some of the reasons mentioned earlier, we might want these systems to be able to be shaped in part by the people who are affected by them. That's a kind of basic principle behind the ideal of democracy, that people, if people are part of a social system that affects their lives, they have a right to have some say about how that social system operates. It doesn't mean they have a right to have more say than anybody else, so that's kind of why in most democracies everybody gets one vote, because one person's input shouldn't be worth any more than another person's input. But you want to make sure that everybody's input is at least worth something, or is at least worth an appropriate amount in comparison, a minimum appropriate amount in comparison with everybody else's who's playing a part in shaping that system. And so this is part of what is behind the ideal of having these systems be subject to stakeholder input. We also, a couple of other items. We want the systems to be environmentally sustainable. If they're not, that has environmental effects, which may be sort of intrinsically bad, but also can be bad, of course, for humans, and cause harms either for this generation or future generations. And then we also want these systems to generally have a positive cost benefit analysis. So if there's some technology that arguably does more social harm than good, then that is an argument to either pull that technology offline or change that technology to try to change that balance so that it's doing more social good than harm. So some interesting comparison cases here are like automobiles. Automobiles, of course, have generated a lot of pollution, suburban sprawl, roadkill, all kinds of problems. But they also have extraordinary benefits for individuals and for society. And so the sort of societal calculation so far has been that in general, we want to have automobiles be a part of our society, even though they have all of these other negative effects, car accidents and health problems associated with that. Cars are still one of the most dangerous technologies we interact with on a daily basis. But, overall, they probably do more good than harm. And then we try to mitigate the harms. We try to reduce those harms so that we get a better CBA ratio overall. So we try to put in better safety equipment in cars, and we try to have better, rules of the road and really crack down on drunk driving and things like that to reduce the costs of automobiles. Put in more bike lanes, things like that. Move towards electric rather than gas powered. So similar kinds of considerations apply to our AIs. When we ask overall, how much good or harm is this, technology doing? And a controversial issue that came up was about ChatGPT and the way that it was released suddenly and all of the negative effects that it had in terms of making it hard to tell whether the writing somebody did was their own writing, the way that it enabled plagiarism across, higher education spaces. And so there was some question about whether ChatGPT overall had a positive CBA and whether it was perhaps released too soon. So these are some considerations there in the CBA category. Another item that the jury is still sort of out about is social media. I mean, it seems like overall social media is not going away. The value of information sharing and everything is just so great. But there are some downsides of social media. There seem to be, such as polarization and kind of discouraging people or somehow allowing people to kind of avoid in-person social interactions and then undermining people's facility with those social interactions. So that may be something that's happening with younger generations. Also, cyberbullying and things like that. So, these are the kinds of considerations also that we would want to bring to bear in our evaluation of AIs.